This is the state of Colorado. The state of Colorado is a spontaneous discussion of the issues. Funding for the state of Colorado is provided by the Adolph Coors Foundation. Colorado National Bank will help you get there. The Monfort Charitable Foundation, and the investment firm of Piper Jaffray and its employees, looking toward the future since 1895. Now, Don Kinney.
Good evening. Growth is part of each topic. More cars, more accidents. And Carnahan, cost of auto insurance in Colorado is far above the national average. Bill Scanlon, more students. School districts need more schools, yet academic programs are being dropped. Guy Kelly, the surge of statewide growth is slowing. The economy remains strong. Mark Obmascik, one federal agency differs with another about a $100 million cleanup. We begin with smaller numbers. Cost of insurance. Colorado drivers pay more. And Carnahan.
Well, that's right, Don. Colorado drivers in 1994 paid an average of $721 for car insurance. When you look at people who purchased three types of insurance, liability, collision, and comprehensive, it was as much as $823. The $721 figure is $140 above the median average for the rest of the country.
And though it would sound like an honor, Colorado's 13th in the nation.
Right. And that trend seems to be getting worse. In 1987, Colorado was 23rd. By 1993, we were 16th, and then in 94, we were 13th.
What's the reason?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. There are a lot of different variables, which is something the insurance experts say it makes it difficult to compare state to state. But one thing, in Colorado, we have a higher percentage of urban dwellers. It's 81% compared to 79%, which is a pretty small percentage, but that's one thing that they've looked at. So
we're driving a little closer to the next car, thus more accidents.
Right. There are more accidents. There are seven claims put in for every 100 premiums in Colorado, which is right around what the national average is. 7 claims
each year?
Correct.
So our chances of being in an auto accident are at least 7 in 100 each year?
Well, that's the way that figure would appear to be interpreted. There could be some other variables in that I wouldn't know about. But of course, there are people who don't put through claims as well.
The big hailstorm back at the beginning of this decade is still costing us.
Right. Some insurance experts say they feel that is still costing us, and it's also costing us in the sense that it's a risk factor. When the insurance carriers are putting together their risks, one thing they look at is past history, and we do have a history of pretty severe hailstorms. So we're still paying for the 1990 hailstorm in that respect as well.
If Guy Kelly goes out and picks up a ticket for speeding, will his insurance go up?
Well, it's quite possible. The insurance carriers don't seem to be real willing to cut any slack. I talked with one man in particular who had a ticket and 2 very minor accidents, and his auto insurance where it's quadrupled.
Just from one accident?
He had 2 minor accidents, totaling $800 in damage.
What does the insurance company say when you question that? Why should it go up so much?
Well, they're saying that they're putting together all the risk factors, and that when you have someone like that who has a high risk, then they need to raise their rates. But that's causing a lot of consternation among people who are saying, look, I've been paying, in the last 12 years, I've paid $12,000 in insurance and never put through a claim. Now it's time for me to get some of that back.
Now, I didn't mean to put the responsibility on Guy Kelly, but there are a lot of folk who, whether they're driving out on Pena Boulevard or on the interstates, are getting speeding tickets.
Right, especially on Pena Boulevard. It seems like police are catching a lot of people flying before they even get to the airport. Pena Boulevard last year had 3,300 plus tickets issued to motorists. And that was far above the next highest speed trap, which was at University on East First Avenue between Downing and University.
The police department says, we don't care if people know where those speed traps are. They just aren't paying attention anyway.
Right. I've talked to some cops who said that they actually will have the police car sitting right there in plain view, and the people will just go flying by it. They're just so distracted, they don't even think about it.
Maybe that's why there are 7 claims per 100.
Possibly.
And they want to be visible. They feel that if they keep writing tickets, eventually people will slow down.
Right. They feel that this is good news for people to know because they'll slow down. And then they also said that there will still be plenty of people out there for them to catch. So it doesn't matter.
A couple years ago, you looked at this same story, and the Spear Boulevard up to I-25 was the best ticket area.
Right. That was interesting to me. That a few years ago, the Spear Viaduct was by far the biggest speed trap, and there were some theories that it was the biggest speed trap because it was so close to police traffic headquarters, and they only had to go a few miles to get to it. But now, with the new airport opening, it's not even a contest anymore.
And Carnahan of the Rocky Mountain News. Let's talk a little bit of business and environment. To Mark Obmascik. Over the last few weeks, we've been discussing enterprise zones. This week, up at the State House, they said, well, maybe we should introduce a bill to at least reform it a little.
A little bit. This was actually a bill that was in the works before both of the newspapers in town really started doing some reporting on enterprise zones. It came out of the Legislative Audit Committee, and what it does is tighten some of the standards for enterprise zones themselves. This, again, it's the program that they tried to encourage new economic development in distressed areas. They gave businesses tax breaks if they would move into these areas. What happened was that between the legislature and state regulators, they ended up declaring 70% of the geographic area of Colorado as an economically distressed enterprise zone. Really, there have been quite a few abuses that people have found, and the bill now is started to move through the legislature.
Larry Kallenberger, the director of the
Department of
Local Affairs, says, sure, we've made some mistakes, but it's a good program overall.
Yeah, by and large, if you look at the politics of this issue, we definitely, after we started running stories, we definitely heard from a lot of people who said that it's a scam. Just do away with it. It's not fair to people who aren't in an enterprise zone. But if you look at the politics of the legislature, I mean, what do you expect legislators to say? I'm going to stick my neck out to take away tax breaks for the biggest companies in the state that give me most of my campaign contributions. That's not the way that politics works. And in fact, we saw some testimony at a legislative hearing yesterday on this bill. And sure enough, the Colorado Association of Commerce and Industry, which represents the big boys, the biggest companies in the state, who, by the way, are the biggest beneficiaries of enterprise zones, came out in favor of the bill, but they were a little bit skeptical of any plans to make zones re-qualify to really prove that they are economically distressed. On the other hand, the lobbyists from the National Federation of Independent Business, which are the little guys, came and said that you ought to wipe out the whole program, that it's not fair, you ought to look at the whole corporate tax structure of the state. And the committee ended up voting pretty much the way that Casey, big business, wanted them to.
Mark Obmascik, to your specialist area of the environment. Little Vasquez Creek up near Winter Park, it's become a bit of an issue when you pack down some snow.
Well, a little bit. When people ski, I think they usually don't think of what the mountain looks like in the summer. Well, in the case of Winter Park, the ski resort several years back got permission to expand its boundaries to develop some new runs in an area called Vasquez Ridge. The problem was there was a creek there called Little Vasquez Creek that had some rare trout there. They're called Colorado River cutthroats. Once they were really the predominant species on most of the western slope in cold water creeks, but the problem is they like to breed with other fish, and the gene pool has really been decimated. And plus, they're stupid fish, by and large. They're really beautiful. I fish for them. I've caught them. But I mean, you could throw a leaf on the water, and sometimes they'll think it's a bug and they'll attack it. So that led to their downfall. Anyway, so what happened at Winter Park was that a snowcat operator got in a section that was roped off and supposed to be off limits to grooming, and just packed literally a ton or probably several tons of snow right in the middle of the creek where there was one of the few populations remaining of these Colorado River cutthroats.
Well, there are about 30 of these populations in the state.
Yeah, they've really suffered over the years. There's not many of them left. And what really made this incident strange is that Winter Park, by and large, has had a pretty good environmental record. In fact, they actually won an award, a National Environmental Award, several years back for the resort's protection of this particular creek. What happened, though, I think it was the Big Valley Run or the Big Meadow Run. It's a narrow catwalk area, and by grooming an extra 50 feet, you make it a lot easier for some skiers to get around. The resort really could have done a better job of setting off the area for its snowcat operators at night, so they wouldn't know, or so they would know not to get in there.
And though this has become an issue with several state and federal departments, they don't know the impact on the fish and won't know until next summer.
It's, as anybody who's been in the high country knows, it's really been an amazing snow year, and they think that they would do more damage by going into the creek to see if the fish are still surviving. They do more damage if they did that now than waiting till snow melt in the spring and summer.
And Mark Obmascik, we kind of started out on politics with you. A political story about an environmental cleanup of Summitville, that huge mine up near Wolf Creek Pass.
Hard to believe that when a mine goes bad and costs taxpayers $120 million that there'd be politics involved. But sure enough, Summitville has really become kind of a national poster child for abuses in the mining industry today. Really was a renegade operation, definitely not the norm for most of the good, responsible mining companies that we have, many of which are based here in Denver. But what happened was Scott McGinnis, who's a congressman from the Western Slope, went ahead and asked for an Inspector General's report of the way that EPA and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation have handled the cleanup out there. And sure enough, he found that government spent more money than it needed to have spent at the cleanup of Summitville.
And that's one federal agency passing judgment on another with probably political overtones.
No question. I mean, it is pretty curious that, I mean, the cost overruns that the Inspector General found are real. EPA definitely messed up. They paid more than they had to for the cleanup. The figures that were in the Inspector General's report were something like $6 million out of a $100 million total cleanup bill. But it's still government. It's a government project, and let's face it, if we built DIA at a 6% cost overrun, people would be thrilled. Government blows budgets all the time, and if you look at some of the politics of this issue, and I mean, McGinnis made a big deal about the overruns at Summitville, but he's not made a big deal about overruns of some of his own pet projects, such as Animas-La-Plata, the big dam and proposed for southwestern Colorado, such as I-70 through Glenwood Canyon, such as the being able to buy mining patent rights on federal land for $2.50 an acre, or below-cost timber sales over there. So it's, you know, costs. People look at the costs that they want to see.
Scott McGinnis, call Mark Obmascik. One final line there, and that is EPA says, look, this was a crisis environment when we began, and no one's considering that now.
That's their argument. McGinnis has a good point, though, when he says that it definitely was a crisis when it began, but EPA kept the emergency on for 3 years. There's actual some sort of official designation that says it's an emergency, and it means you pay a lot more for that sort of thing. At some point, really, the emergency at Summitville ended. It became clear that EPA had controlled the dam, that wasn't going to leak all this hundreds of millions of dollars of cyanide chemicals in it. And at that point, they could have slowed down and gotten better bids and gotten a better handle on the